Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy, and is WWE wrestling a sport?
Oh, that is interesting. That is interesting. I am not a WWE fan. I've seen it like on Sports Center or whatever, but I've never sat down with the intention to watch it.
I have never sat down with the intention of watching WWE wrestling, but I have been flipping through the channels before, and then you stay there for 20 minutes. It's reasonably entertaining. It's quite
Yeah,
funny.
I I'm 100%. I'm not going to say it's not athletic. I'm not going to say these guys aren't like
Oh, no,
they are
100%.
athletes.
It is they are athletes, it's athletic. And
Yeah.
if you look at the backgrounds of a bunch of wrestlers, they're
Yeah.
tremendous athletes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I 100% they are athletes. I believe I would say it's not a sport. To me it seems the way I understand it, it seems more like a production. Like it'd be closer to in my mind it's closer to like a stage play or like ballet or something like that than it is to actual wrestling.
Well, see that, and so I'll explain to you why I'm like very 50-50 on this.
Mhm.
As if we think about like what actually makes a sport, and we've talked a little bit about this
Mhm.
before in the intro of the show, is there's obviously some sort of skill, physical ability, athleticism task that has to be done, which in
Mhm.
wrestling there clearly is. There's feats of strength and acrobatics and different famous finishing moves like the people's elbow and all this wild stuff. So to me, the athletic and skill component is there.
Mhm.
The other part of what is a sport is the competitive aspect. There's winners, there's losers, there's competition. And technically, in wrestling, in the WWE, there are winners, there are losers, there are title belts, there are prizes, there are different divisions that you're trying to climb to the WWE, which is like the pinnacle of wrestling compared to the other divisions, but it's in a way it's kind of rigged because like you described, it's like an entertainment thing. So
Well,
that's where
that's
I'm torn 50-50 because it in some ways it checks all the boxes to be a sport.
so okay. I didn't know that part, and I see, but my thing is like, how do you move up? Like, I'm not a
That I don't
fan.
know.
I'm not a fan, so obviously I don't know how it actually works, but the way it appears to me is that it's predetermined. Like they're wrestling, but it's really a dance. Is like these are the moves we're gonna do in this order, and so before it starts, they've already planned who's winning. You know what I mean? Is how I interpret it. That might not be true,
Yeah, I think
but
that's how they do it. But like I said, there's technically still
yeah. So
winners and losers, and there's wrestlers that hold title belts in their weight class or their division the same way like a boxer or someone like that in a weight class sport holds a division title.
yeah, and like so, I guess
I, I don't know.
you could say from a fan's perspective, maybe, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like they're actually competing. Like to me, it feels like they're all on the same team. The way the people putting on a play are all on the same team. The people in a dance recital are all on the same team. Like the people in a band are all on the same team. You know what I mean? Like those are all athletic things, but they're on the same team. There's no competition.
Is it maybe just a really corrupt sport? Like it's the most rigged
That's an
sporting
interesting
league
that's an interesting
to
perspective
ever
to take.
exist because every match is fixed.
Everyone's just throwing it or yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective to take. You could say that there's 100% money on the line with all these things, you know.
I mean, there was the what was the guy's last name? Donahue or something, the NBA official that was like fixing games and trying to call fouls and do things and he got caught.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
And I mean, no one I don't think considers the NBA not a sport. Because of
No,
that, it was just in that case it was corrupt.
right.
Or there was the what do they call it in Italy? Uh, the soccer league, like Syria or whatever the premier, like the top notch of Italian soccer, there was like the corruption amongst all the officials, and teams were paying off officials to make calls and
Oh,
whatever.
geez.
So that's like match fixing where
Yeah.
soccer's still a sport, basketball's still a sport. So maybe WWE is just the most corrupt match
Yeah.
fixed sport
I
that
mean,
exists.
that could be the case. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it is. If everyone wasn't all on the same page about who's going to win, then it's a sport. I wonder, do you know how WWE started? I have
No
no
idea.
idea because
Neither do I.
I wouldn't be surprised if it has grown into this thing, but it originally actually was wrestling with more freedom.
Like where they just put two people in the ring and they wrestled the same way that two boxers go
Yeah,
into the
but
ring or two
you don't
MMA
get
fighters
points.
go into the octagon.
Yeah, but like maybe more extreme where like you don't win by getting X amount of points. It's a pin or a knockout and that's it. And you can punch each other and you can run in and out of the ring. I don't know. You can use other things. I wonder if people actually got hit with chairs.
Yeah, like where did that originate from? The idea of grabbing a chair
Yeah, why is there a chair around? I don't know.
and bringing it into the ring.
Yeah.
Or the one where they have to the match where they climb the ladder to get the briefcase full of money.
What what is that?
Have you never seen that?
No.
So
That's
there's like a
insane.
ladder, or I don't know if there's a ladder necessarily always in the middle of the ring, but there's ladders present.
Okay, I've seen a ladder in the ring before.
Yeah, but then there's like the prize, the title belt or the prize money or whatever is like hanging from the ceiling. And it's high enough up that you have to be able to set up the ladder, go up the ladder, and then grab the briefcase or the title belt.
Oh, I see. So you have to knock your opponent out long enough to go do that, is the
Yeah.
idea.
Or pull some crazy maneuver where you set up the ladder and then you do whatever and you go flying up the ladder.
Yeah.
And then you grab onto it and then someone kicks the ladder out from under you and then you come crashing back down. Or I can't
Yeah,
believe you've never seen that.
I haven't seen that. I've seen the ladder, but that's crazy. Like, I don't know, man. That's just those are stage props, you know?
This is why, like when I said I've never made a point of watching WWE, like, oh, tonight it's WWE Super Slam. Like, I
Yeah.
can't wait to go out and watch that. But 100% I've been flipping through the channels and I'm like, I got nothing going on for the next 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I can see what's up with this ladder in the middle of the wrestling ring. You've piqued my interest.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I guess it's yeah, I'm of the opinion it's not a sport. But like I would say there's still value in it. Like it's not different than a play. It's not different than a movie or something. You don't know what's going to happen in a movie. You don't know what's going to happen in WWE. They know what's going to happen, but we don't. So there's still suspense for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't call it a sport. I'm also personally not a fan of any like combat sports really. Like I don't like to watch them. That's not
I'm
my
not a
thing.
huge
Like
fan of combat sports either.
yeah.
Like I've watched them before, but like I said, I don't make a point. I
Mhm.
was just struggling because when I think of my definition of a sport, technically the WWE would check all the boxes.
Yeah.
But like you, I wasn't totally certain where I was like, oh, yeah, but it is a sport. It's
Mhm.
probably the only quote unquote sport that has fit that definition that then I'm like, maybe it's not actually a sport, but it does
Mm.
check all the boxes. Maybe that means I need to come up with a new definition for what is a sport.
I think it's a fair definition, but I guess it's you have to then define competition. If the two aspects are athleticism and competition, then what does competition mean?
I need a more thorough definition
Yeah,
of what is competition then.
yeah. Because I don't know. It would be interesting to talk to somebody who does watch WWE or at the very least knows how it works better than we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they don't compete with each other during the match, like I guess there's different, like you can compete outside of the match, I guess. Like maybe the competition in WWE is like fan support and you need the fans to be on your side because if the fans are on your side, then the league or
You get
whatever.
stage time.
They want you to win because the fans want you to win. So then you move up. So maybe it's like that. Maybe it's like how influencers compete against each other.
It's a popularity contest.
Yeah. Then it's like a reality show. That's what it's like. But it's not real at all.
We'll have to do some more investigating then. And I just wasn't sure. I was curious to know what you
Yeah.
thought.
No, that's good. That was worth the hype before we started this. I like that one. And I like that we got to talk about what is a sport, because we've alluded to that before.
We have. You know what I'm hyped for?
What's that?
Is to find out what athlete scenario thing you got waiting for me in this episode that I
Yeah,
have
I guess we should preface what we're doing this one.
Yes.
So
Trying something a little different today.
Yeah. It is weightlifting part 3. And basically watch the first 2 probably. We talk about what's good about weightlifting, what's potentially limiting about weightlifting. Mostly we say it depends a lot. But then today we're going to talk about different cases, hypothetical athletes that we're each bringing to the table, with the idea of getting a little bit more concrete and not as much it depends.
Trying to give some clarity to the it depends.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we've done is Braden has created a fictitious athlete, which I am then going to have to train. So he's going to tell me who this athlete is. He's going to give me a little bit of information. And then I'm going to decide, do I think weightlifting is a beneficial tool for this athlete or not? And I'm going to do the same thing for Braden. I have created a fictitious athlete who is not real. And Braden is going to be responsible for training this individual and deciding if he thinks weightlifting is or is not a beneficial tool.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what the other person has planned. So this profile I've written, Braden doesn't know it. We're going to find out about this live on air,
Mm-hmm.
and then talk for 15 or 20 minutes on each case, and then switch to the other one and kind of see where we go. So we are traveling into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very excited to find out what I get.
Yes.
It's like opening a gift.
Me too. And I'm up first here. Or you're up first. And
I'm up first.
I'm up
to read.
Respond.
Yeah. Yes, so the pressure is on.
I'm in the hot seat.
You're in the hot seat. That's right. Okay. Funny we talked a little bit about combat sports.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I did not pick a WWE wrestler.
That's good.
I did not pick that.
I would pick hypertrophy all day, every day. Is there
hypertrophy and steroids, along with gymnastics and acrobatics training. Done.
Yeah.
So for you, I've created a fictitious 24-year-old MMA athlete.
That's cool.
This MMA athlete is a former college wrestler. So they competed in wrestling in college for 4 years, and they are now looking to fight semi-pro in MMA and try to climb the ranks and see how good they can be. So they have a decade worth of wrestling experience, and they started lifting when they got to college. And so they've been lifting for the previous 4 years when they were at their college wrestling team. The caveat here, though, is while they've been lifting for 4 years, it was under the guidance of their head wrestling coach, because the school did not have a strength and conditioning coach. So well-versed in a lot of things, but not a lot of formal, call it well-prepared planning, because they didn't have a strength coach.
Right. Okay. So not necessarily a lot of like planned periodization type stuff, but like, are we to assume that he's got reasonably good technique with like squats and deadlifts and things like that? Or is it
like
not?
They've done them. But I could imagine if you worked with somebody, like if you got somebody who lifted with someone who was not a strength coach for 4 years, you could probably find some flaws in their squatting and deadlifting.
Yeah.
Because they weren't working with maybe the best available person.
Right. But they're not necessarily going to hurt themselves like any day.
No, they can go into the weight room and not die for sure.
All right.
And as far as an injury history goes, they had a couple of concussions throughout their wrestling career. They did miss one chunk of their college season due to a hyperextended elbow. I don't care which elbow, could be left or right, doesn't matter.
Okay.
And they do have some chronic low back pain that's there all the time, but it's never taken them out of practice, never taken them out of training. So it's not really something that they worry about.
Okay. Interesting.
And
That's
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 my,
a detailed injury history. The chronic low back pain worries me.
does it?
I don't like that. um yeah, that's cool. Okay. So when I was coming up with my uh athlete, I imagine you have some idea of how you would train this person.
Mhm.
So when I was coming up with my athlete, the way that I thought about if I would include weightlifting or not, the first question was what parts of their sport could benefit from weightlifting? Like how could weightlifting transfer into their sport? And from what I understand about MMA and wrestling, the like the takedowns or like it's almost like a tackle sometimes where you kind of lunge
Yeah, it's like a
towards
drop and shoot type
towards
thing.
the lower body. So I think that kind of a thing, you could benefit from like the power and the speed from that and the ability to drop into that position, honestly. Um, the mobility components, like you definitely want a lot of mobility for MMA so you can not be put in such extreme positions when you're in various holds and things like that.
Well, and sometimes you're forced into those positions.
Well, that's what I mean is like
Yeah.
if you have more mobility, then you don't need like a more extreme position is more comfortable for you relative to other people.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean the double pulse, just the pure neurological double pulse that we talk about all the time, um, is very present. Um, and one of the prime limiters of weightlifting that we talked about last time was the lack of like reactivity with the ground, which there is not. There is a little bit, I think, in MMA, but not that much. Um, so you're not dealing with that limiter. So I think I would. It depends obviously on how this person moves in the gym when I actually get to see what they're capable of with the various components of what weightlifting could be.
You find out how good their wrestling coach was as a strength
Yeah,
coach.
that's right. That's right. Um, but yeah, I would probably stay away from jerks and snatches, at least initially, with a little bit of worry on that elbow. Um, I'd probably stay away from a lot of stuff from the floor with worry about that back pain. Um, but yeah, those are my initial thoughts, I guess. Um, yeah, I think cleans. I think cleans like a hang clean to full depth would be good. I think hang power cleans would be good. Um, I think you could do some cool stuff like I talked about in the first episode with on the minute or even shorter durations. Like using it as a conditioning tool, I think would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, there could be benefit there as well, especially
Mm-hmm.
because of the ridiculous demands,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah, exactly.
work to rest ratio wise in combat sports.
Yeah, exactly. So I think using it that way or doing like cluster sets, something like that could be a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, just from the lower body power shifting weight into a kick, shifting into like a grapple kind of a thing, and the mobility, I think there's benefit from it. But I mean, if they have a lot of pain and these things aggravate their pain, or they're not able to pick up the movement pattern, that like there's I imagine with this person there's going to be a lot of things that need to be taken care of before getting into that, and that kind of a thing.
Would you consider any like derivatives of weightlifting, like maybe just pulling, for example?
Well, that's what I mean. Like I don't know right away. I probably wouldn't have them pulling from the floor. I'd probably have them from a box or from a hang position.
Some, yeah.
Um, and yeah, like I do really like the power versions where you're catching it up top, um, to practice like receiving force and stopping force very quickly. Um, but I also would like them to be catching it low to, keep the mobility and practice that. Like I would want them to catching in a lot of different positions, I think, to have more variety and more general control, like torso control. That's one big thing I really like about the weightlifting is that you're having to control your torso, um, and receive load dynamically very quickly in various positions. So yeah, I think I would be I would have an easier time programming like some of those derivatives instead of uh, like the full movements.
Do you think it could be worth using the jerk because of the ability to land in the split position?
Yeah, I do. I
Because you
definitely do.
see them like drop and explode into people, but it's from like a low lunge position. So I know you kind of talked about, they had the history of the hyperextended elbow, but do you think it'd be worth potentially trying to work through that in order to get them to a place where they could catch in some sort of a split position? Probably with the jerk, I feel like that's the easier than trying to do like a split snatch, for example.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I definitely do think so. Um, yeah, and I think it would be more of an issue in the snatch anyway, the elbow. Um, and like I do think like from the mobility perspective and like required stability perspective, I think there'd be a lot of benefit in getting to the point where you can overhead squat or you can snatch. Um, but and like it all obviously depends on if the elbow is still affecting him or whatever, or how bad that injury actually was at the time.
Mm.
But yeah, 100% catching in the split position, dropping into the split position. I think there's a lot of benefits in, yeah, for, and same with cleans and stuff that you have to drop to catch the load, um,
In a different position.
in a
Now you're
different
in like
position.
a squat or a bilateral, which
Yeah. So then, yeah, dropping into a more athletic position, like a quarter squat, or dropping into a lunge, like you're going to be doing different stuff that way. I do also for sports, I guess most sports, but sports like this where there's a lot of the power comes from your legs, transfers through your torso to the arms, like boxing would be one. Even like football, any tackling sport, any like there's a lot of sports that are like that. I like the idea of a jerk or a push press or something like that, where it's very easy for you to start the force production in your lower body and transfer it easily through your upper body into another object. Um, so yeah, things like that for sure. I see value in for MMA in general. Obviously, it would depend more on this person's injury history, but yeah, all of it. Like I'd want to make sure before getting into anything really that the back is actually fine and not just him, you know, being a
it is
meathead.
as nonchalant as I made it
Yeah,
out to be in the description.
yeah, or the elbow. But I mean, it sounds like the elbow is mostly fine. So
Yeah, it was. I just made it up as like they missed time somewhere in
mm-hmm,
their competitive season, but
mm-hmm,
that was a thing of the past.
mm-hmm,
Um, was there any? So one of the, I'm just curious to ask your opinion on this. Then, so one of the reasons I picked a combat sport athlete
mm-hmm,
is because I do think, as you've mentioned, with a lot of the benefits, I do think there's tremendous adaptation and benefit you can pull from weightlifting for combat sports,
mm-hmm.
whether it was wrestling, MMA, any of those styles of sports. But the one thing, particularly with like MMA, for example, is it's such a combination. There's boxing elements, there's like Muay Thai, there's Jiu Jitsu, there's like traditional wrestling, there's all these different elements of combat sports tied into one. And you have to be such a versatile athlete from a skill perspective. The big thing I was struggling with was, is it worth the time and effort to teach somebody how to weightlift when they're in a sport that's already super complex? That was the big thing I was struggling with, is like, do you just make the training sessions? Here's what we got to do to create the physical adaptation. But especially in this case where this individual is picking up a new sport, do you just let them have the time to figure out the complexity of the sport, or is there any skill interference? That was the big thing that I struggle with combat sports, is the technical component of both those things.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. I don't see skill interference. I don't think that's really a big thing, but with the one thing that this, like, the garage strength guy mentioned in one of his videos, was that he likes the weightlifting movements more. Like, he would have throwers and people doing like that kind of repetitive skill sport. He would have them doing weightlifting more often than someone who is on a field sport or a court sport or a wrestler, probably because uh, non like track and field and powerlifting and weightlifting, it's all very specific, repetitive. But anything that's reactive, like against another person or another team, you're required to do so much more.
It's like a closed sport. You know what you're getting into.
Closed versus open sport.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So open sports need to be athletic and mobile and fast and powerful and stable and strong in so many more positions and directions and movements. So from that perspective, because I would argue in MMA more so than the other combat sports, likely more so than in my personal opinion right now, than most other court field ice sports. You're going to find yourselves in a wider variety of positions and uh, like movements and things like that. I think in my current
I mean, yeah,
interpretation of
MMA is
things.
sort of just a mix of every combat sport that's out there.
Yeah.
There's wrestling aspects like on the ground. There's boxing and, hand-to-hand combat. There's the kicking aspect from like kickboxing and all this other, like, it's all of that thrown into one sport.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just be
So
good at one of those things.
exactly. So from my perspective, then, just for that reason, it maybe makes sense to have a wider variety of like power speed movements than like the time it takes to, especially with this person like already like maybe doesn't have the best foundation, um and would take a lot of time to learn these movements theoretically. That time might be better spent doing, like we talked about, weight room economy, that you get so much out of doing the Olympic lifts. For somebody in this situation, it might be better for them to have to do a lot of different exercises to get all of those benefits. Like, they might be better off doing med ball throws and kettlebell swings and jumps and different plyos and, like throwing different kinds of implements in different kinds of directions, positions, whatever, like that. All that sort of stuff, I think, maybe would benefit them more, and it wouldn't be a hindrance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just curious, like I said, to kind of get your opinion, because I do think it makes sense for combat sport athletes, especially I think MMA and wrestling, because of the constant engage and disengage with like your opponent, in the sense you're always moving a load. Like in boxing, for example, you're only really ever making contact with either your fist to the opponent or the opponent's fist to you. You're never grappling or
Mm.
trying to apply force, right? Compared to MMA or wrestling, you are trying to manipulate or move your opponent's body around or push them off of you or tackle them or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, where I do think it makes sense with MMA and wrestlers and stuff like that to do weightlifting. But I created this scenario to kind of put like a bit of a question mark there to kind of help
Mm-hmm.
generate some of the
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah. No, I like that for sure.
But I do
And yeah,
think it could be a
that's
big benefit for those athletes for sure.
yeah, I do think there's a lot of benefits. So yeah, it's just going to come down to like their capacity to learn it and their capacity to do it physically, I think. But that's a really good point that compared to other combat sports, like I do see a lot more benefit in an MMA or a wrestler or like even I think a lot of the other like jujitsu and those other ones are more grappling sports
Yeah, there's
as
more
well.
groundwork and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, when compared to like karate or like boxing, those where it's not you're not grappling nearly as much.
Well, yeah, like in
Um,
boxing, as soon as two people come together, the referee splits them up.
yeah, so
You're
that
never grappling and
yeah,
tackling your opponent or anything like that.
exactly. So that to me is very much more like a like it's basically just speed. I think like how
Mm.
fast can you dodge and how fast can you throw your fist, um, versus like MMA requires you to be fast in that respect with your punches and kicks, but also be strong to move your opponent around and like throw them and powerful to throw them and strong to resist them and weightlifting requires all those things as well, you know. So yeah, I see a lot of benefit there as well.
So your final verdict, I guess, would it be a yes or a no to weightlift this individual?
To weightlift that individual, um, I'm going to say no.
No?
I
Okay.
think, I think, but I do see a lot of benefit for martial artists in general. Um, so maybe one with a better base, maybe one that, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess right now I'll say no.
I think I would
Maybe,
give it a shot.
yeah.
I would try it.
So I think, yeah, I don't think I
And if it's a
would.
dumpster fire, then we have alternatives. But I
Yeah.
think I would like to try with this individual to put some weightlifting and weightlifting derivatives in there because I think it could benefit them.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I think I'll agree with that. Some derivatives, like start the learning process
yes,
and see how it goes. And at the, like, if the only weightlifting thing they ever do is a hang clean pull, that's fine. Like I said, I think there's benefits to a lot of different variations of power movements and speed movements for them.
Mhm.
So if you just stick with one of the simplest ones that they can do, that's perfectly fine.
I mean, yeah, I'm still going to throw like, you know me, I love the kettlebell. There's still going to be kettlebell swings. There's still going to be
Yeah.
other stuff, but I think I would try with like once I was done creating this, I'm like, I think I would try weightlifting this person. Let's see what that foundation is. And
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's more to be gained than there is potentially to be lost
Mm-hmm.
with this person. So that was sort of what I thought, but I was just curious to get the final verdict from what you thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So that's it then.
That's
And now it's my turn.
made up scenario numero uno.
Yeah.
Done. Now I'm in
Um,
the hot seat. We can trade spots. I'm in the hot seat now.
yeah. That was very different than what I've got. So
Okay, good.
um, yeah.
You're not going to give me a kickboxer, and now we're going to basically talk about the same thing.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a 22-year-old swimmer.
Oh,
Are you taking
swimming.
notes?
Here we go.
You're taking notes, eh?
I just want to write this down. Yeah.
22-year-old swimmer. Their race is the 400 meter. Like that's the one that they can do.
Okay.
Um,
It's their best event, let's say.
that's their best event.
Okay.
Freestyle. Um, so you can make up whatever stroke you prefer them to do. Maybe that changes if they should do weightlifting or not. So they've just finished university. They started weight training when they got into university under the team. We'll say they had like a varsity strength coach, not a swimming strength coach, but like strength coach of all of the varsity teams
Okay.
trained this person, not the swimming coach. Um, they've been swimming basically since they were, six or
Yeah,
whatever. They've been
typical
swimming.
swimmer.
They've been
Like they've been
swimming
in the
for
pool their
forever.
whole life.
Yeah. They are an Olympic hopeful. They're like good enough to like go to trials, I guess. I'm not really sure how the Olympic process works. They're not on the Olympic team.
I think it works the same for swimming as it does track, where there's like
Okay.
trials and you qualify. So that, well, let's say that's what's happening.
They're
We'll call
they're
them an
they
Olympic
want
hopeful.
to qualify.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, so they've been training for a while. They are proficient in most standard weight remove, like they can deadlift, they can squat. Like strength coach would say, like, yeah, you're pretty good at that. They're reasonably experienced with weightlifting. They're not amazing, but they've done the movements. They have some experience.
Okay.
Um,
So actual Olympic weightlifting, as we like to
yeah,
call it.
yeah,
Okay.
Olympic weightlifting. They do have a history of shoulder impingement issues.
Classic.
Yeah, and that's all I got. That's all I wrote down. If you have more specific questions, then I'll pull an answer out of my ass.
No, that's pretty good. That gives me, I have no idea how long it takes to actually do a 400-meter in the pool.
I looked that up. I looked that
I
up.
don't think it matters though. I
It
would like,
mattered.
if I was going to train this person, I would need to know potentially from a conditioning aspect.
I can share that because I did look it up because it mattered to me.
Okay.
Um, it's around for men and women, both in the. You can do it in 50-meter pools or in 25-meter pools.
I think they would compete in a 50, would they not? Because that's an Olympic size pool.
I guess for the Olympics they would, but apparently you can set records in both.
Okay.
But it's just under 4 minutes
Okay.
for both, pretty much like 3.5 to 350.
So
or
it's like the
so.
equivalent of like a miler in track and field.
I suppose so.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I don't think that would influence whether I weight lift them or not,
Right.
but it would be something that I would need to know if I was going to train
Right.
this made up swimmer. Okay. So initial thoughts
Mm-hmm.
when I think of swimming, I mean, not to take shots at swimming, but have you ever worked with swimmers before?
I have not. I have swam before.
So have I. I wouldn't describe it as swimming. I would describe it as not drowning.
Nice.
Is more so what I do in the pool. But man, swimmers on land, dude, I'm not kidding. Like it's different.
Yeah.
So that's why, as you were reading, like they've done weightlifting, they're proficient with this stuff. I'm like, who is this magical swimmer that knows how to
Okay.
do things on land? This is awesome.
That's hilarious.
So,
Is it worse than volleyball players? Again, not to take shots. Just volleyball
dude, not
players
even
look
close.
like they belong in the air. Like they
Not even
shouldn't be on land
close.
either. Okay.
Not even close.
All right.
Probably yeah, because the environment of being in the water is so different on land, and all the
Yeah.
loading, all the training they do is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd call it an altered state of gravity, but because they're still
Yeah.
on Earth, but
Yeah.
it's way different than doing things being loaded on the ground. And so you can tell that they spend a lot of time in their sport and their training not on the ground. And so you kind of see them exploring it for the first time when they're in the weight room.
I guess that makes sense because yeah, they do, like swimmers swim a lot.
Yeah, like 2-a-days and like
Yeah.
mileage. So my initial thoughts, because now when I think about the sport of swimming, and in some ways it's similar to track in the sense that it's a closed event, it's a repetitive cyclical pattern. And so you want to make sure that they are maximizing the abilities that they need for the swim pattern. And I don't know a tremendous amount about swimming mechanics, but my initial gut feeling is to say no to weightlifting this individual, despite the fact that they're proficient and they've done some weightlifting, because I feel like there's other exercises that could be done that will benefit the cyclical pattern and potentially the reflex in the hip and the shoulder as they're swimming. So when we talked, for example, about like the double pulse and things like that, obviously I know how it works in track and with running because I'm much more versed in that. I don't know exactly what they teach in swimming, but I imagine there's a point where with the arms and the legs, you want to be producing force at certain times and then relaxing. And you have to do that continuously over and over and over and over again. And so I feel like incorporating an exercise that, from a speed power perspective, that addresses that component better than weightlifting would maybe be a better alternative in this scenario. The other thing is that I don't know how, like, obviously as they're turning and coming off the wall, you get to press into an object, but applying force in the water is so different than applying force on the ground because you're not dealing with a solid object.
Yeah, so that was, as I was thinking about it, without getting into whether or not I think they should or not. Like I said, the first thing I thought of was where could it apply? And my thoughts were you jump off the block
Yeah.
to start the race and you push off the walls
To transition.
to turn. Yeah. And so those were the areas where I thought it could apply because that's where you're pushing off of something solid. That's where you have to be producing a lot of power.
And you're
I was
producing it
actually,
against a rigid,
yeah, like
solid object
the
that's
wall or
essentially
the,
ground.
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, there's no give or anything. Whereas with the act of swimming itself, like if you were just always in a straight line, yeah, you're not pushing off of anything. You're not moving any weight other than your own body weight. You're not, like, you have, all of your movements are more resisted than they would otherwise be. So to me, there's no, like, it is power, but it also isn't really. Like, it's kind of power strength the whole time. Like, it's not like you produce a lot of force and then sustain it. It's like you're consistently, like, as you're pulling yourself through the water. Again, I'm not like a high level swimmer, so I don't really know. But I agree. I don't think weightlifting transfers to the act of swimming itself really at all.
Yeah. And
It
so
would just
that's where I
be,
feel like there would be,
yeah,
it may not be worth the time and effort, especially in, now I'm taking some of the other scenario here. If this individual is an Olympic hopeful and they want to swim well at trials, we may not being given the affordance to, oh, we have 2 years to properly teach you how to do A, B, and C. We might, oh, in a calendar year, we need to have you prepared to swim at a high level. And so, if, yes, coming off the blocks is important, but I would argue in a 4-minute race,
yeah, it's not a huge deal.
let's put it this way: the person who's first off the blocks isn't necessarily going to win the race.
No, I did find it interesting.
But the transitions happen a lot more frequently, so that could be
Yeah, they do.
more important. But I think with a jump squat, if this person is proficient in other movements in the weight room, you could do a trap bar squat, a jump squat with the barbell, something like that, I think, to develop the power and the rate of force development you need to come off the wall well.
Yeah. The wall turns, I think, are very important. Like, how, I don't know, like, obviously there's a tremendous amount of technique involved in the flip
Yep.
and timing and all that sort of stuff. But I found it interesting as I was looking into the times and stuff. I expected beforehand that people doing, like, the times for a short pool, a 25-meter pool, I expected them to be a lot higher, or noticeably higher anyway.
Because there was more turns and transitions.
Exactly. So
Okay.
more, like, a higher percentage of the race you're stopped, right?
Yes.
As you're turning, like, you're stopped. But for women, the time was the same, essentially. Like, it was 3:53 ish for both of them, for 50-meter and 25-meter pools. And for men, it was actually significantly, like, it was like 13 seconds lower or something like that for the 25-meter pool. So I think they actually get a lot out of the turn. So the more of the time spent turning, I think, means they're faster.
I think that's because once they come off the wall, they can go underwater, because you're faster underwater than you are like on the surface.
Yeah, that's true. But I just think like they move faster with having the push off
with,
the wall
with the
versus like
push.
propelling
Exactly.
themselves through the water.
And
So I
like I said,
think,
it's an important part, but I think it's simply a lower body push.
yes.
So do you need the complexity of weightlifting where you're dealing with all the other stuff? Probably not. And that
Yeah.
would be, so those are probably the two big things, is that I don't think it transfers super well to the actual act of swimming in the water when you're on the surface. There's probably a more time efficient or complexity efficient
Well, the
movement you
thing
could
is,
use to
this
develop the
person,
power.
this person does have this skill already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're all right at it.
And so where I'm looking at from that perspective is in the output. So if
Yeah.
this person is very proficient at squatting, deadlifting, other hinging, other lower body movements, if I give them a less complex exercise, as we talked a little bit about, do I get more speed? Do I get more intent out of the movement because they don't have to stop and think about like, oh, what am I doing? Is the bars coming up or is the bars going overhead? They just load and go, which is very much what they'd be doing in the water, just load and go with as much force as possible. And like I said, then I take into account the scenario where if they are an Olympic trial hopeful, you wouldn't want to have them perform poorly because you didn't have enough time to get them prepared with weightlifting to really get the intent and the adaptation out of the exercise. I'd rather pick something that we can get more training and more adaptation out of rather than, less learning and that type of stuff. So, like I said, those would be the things that are my initial thought. I would say, no, I'm not going to weightlift this individual. Now, the kicker here is, so in terms of a verdict, I would say, no, I'm not going to weightlift this person. But the kicker here is they're 22 years old. I don't know how long swimmers tend to compete for.
I have no idea.
But let's say that person does well. They go to Olympic trials and they're going to swim now for the next 4 years. Or maybe let's say till they're 30. They're going to try to make a couple of Olympic games. I would be curious to explore swimming a little bit more because of the time that you apply force when you're in the water.
Like apply to the wall, you mean? Or
No, when you're actually swimming.
okay.
Because if you think about how long, like think about sprinting, for example, boom, on the ground, off the ground. You have to
Mm-hmm.
apply the force so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But in swimming, like if we think of like a front stroke or a backstroke, you're presumably applying force the entire time that arm is under the water and pulling through. So I'd be curious to explore the mechanics of swimming a little bit more to see if maybe weightlifting could be beneficial when you have the larger window of time, because maybe the time in which you're applying force is a good match,
Mm.
right? So the idea that longer pull, applying a lot of force to try to get what's it called, more force in a longer period of time could potentially be beneficial because of I'm presuming you can spend more time in the water and applying force, but there's going to be an interplay of what's fast enough to stay in the race, but what's slow enough to be able to apply a lot of force. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be the kicker, is that if I was going to be responsible for training this individual, then beyond that, I think further examination of swimming would be beneficial. But off the hop, I would say, no, I'm not going to weight lift that individual. I'll find other ways to produce the power and the speed that they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally would agree with you. Um, I think that's an interesting idea with the amount of time to produce the force. I think it's maybe likely that they would match up well.
It's going to be longer
Um,
than sprinting. Let's say,
yeah,
like, put it that
that's
way,
for
which
sure.
is quick, but I don't know how long it's going to be. So I would need to explore that
Yeah,
because I don't know that.
I don't know either. But regardless of the time, um, at least the way that I think about it, I don't know, and it's probably different for different strokes. Um, but I don't know if like directions of force that you're producing, or like the biomechanical directions that you're moving in and producing force through are a match for swimming at all, really. Like they might be. Like I said, I don't know that. I don't know how like the flutter kick really works biomechanically. But my gut says like these two things look nothing alike. So I don't know that they would work. Um,
I mean, the
the
unfortunate part with swimming in the weight room is because everything in the weight room is ground based, there's not really a whole lot in the weight room that looks like
well, that's right.
swimming.
That's right.
So
Which is fine, but
yeah.
I mean, like you can
So I
like
feel like the weight room for swimmers is truly a place to create general physical adaptations, which you have to then transfer into the pool
yeah,
because it's
that's true.
really hard to mimic that.
That's true. And so then you're just asking yourself like where like what swimming movements require power, what swimming movements require strength, what swimming movements require endurance and stuff, and then you can start to train those things. But yeah, like for something that's so complex and so neurologically demanding potentially as well, like it's maybe just a wasted opportunity. Um, because if it doesn't transfer that well, like I said, I do think it transfers to some degree off the blocks and off the walls. Um, but to your point, I
I
do
mean, there's
believe.
a lot of research shows a strong connection between jumping ability and weightlifting.
Mhm,
So
mhm. So
presumably it should improve their ability to come off the blocks and off the wall.
yes, but I also don't know because they're not resisting gravity; they're resisting like water
What?
resistance. They're moving horizontally, right? And I've seen a little bit of footage of swimmers doing the flip turn underneath the water, and the position, at least that I saw that they ended up in, was it looked similar to the bottom of a squat,
Mm-hmm.
where they're if the wall is the ground, then their hips are below their knees or parallel anyway. Um, and so in my mind, the position where you're actually producing a lot of power in the weightlifting movements is that like hinge, like you're in the hang position,
Yeah, and you're
like
exploding from the
they're
hinge
up,
up.
which is very, very high compared to the bottom of the squat.
Yeah, and
Like
different
you're
loading with the hip and the knee.
exactly. So I think if you wanted to get specific to that position, then doing like a very light squat paused at the bottom where you're just exploding up,
And boom.
or and you could even go lighter and jump, but like starting in that pause position, exploding up from there. Um, because I think to get the benefit, if you're targeting that movement, then you need to be producing power right from that bottom position. And it's not enough to, especially for someone who's not like an expert or a high level weightlifter, they're going to have to be going slow from the floor into that hang position and then explode,
And that's, I mean, the
which
complexity can take away from the intent of the movement.
exactly.
So if we
So,
do a jump squat, boom, they're
yeah,
moving very
exactly.
quickly. If we do weightlifting, they might be moving slower.
Yeah. So I see a lot more benefit in the jump squat, in the trap bar jump, that sort of thing. Um,
Another
and
interesting caveat I just thought of, kind of similar to the idea of like exploring things and with the amount of time that you apply force in weightlifting relative to other movements is would band loading potentially be very beneficial? Because if you, this is what I'm thinking. Like if you imagine you have your hand in the water and you move it slowly, the water doesn't resist you very much. But if you move it faster, the water now resists you. You feel more resistance. So would doing something with the band where the faster you move it, it becomes loaded, it resists you more because it's stretching out. I'd be curious to look into the way the force is applied in the water in that sense, in terms of the resistance, what happens to the resistance of the water as you're going through the stroke. Because potentially a band loaded exercise, either assisting you or resisting you, could maybe be of benefit. And weightlifting, I mean, okay, theoretically, you could put bands on the bar, but it would be a stupid stupid, unsafe idea. You can't really, like I said, if you really wanted to, you could load bands on a bar and do weightlifting, but it would be a terrible idea. So you should never do that. So that's the other thing. You could look into the resistance of the water, and does a band mimic that better? So do you maybe need some exercises that are more appropriate to use with band loading? And then weightlifting would not be one of those options. Again, I'm just,
Yeah, that's interesting.
that's more of the future direction of if I had to work with this person beyond that.
Yeah, I like that thought for sure. And I like how clear you were that do not put bands on the bar if you're weightlifting.
Don't do that.
Yeah, bad idea. I
Like I
think,
said, you could anchor the bands and do it. Like it could be done, but don't do it. It's
yeah,
a very, very bad idea. Stupid.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think bands would be like a banded, like straight arm pull down would mimic like a front crawl position pretty well. I think, like that kind of idea, I think would be good. I also wonder with that kind of idea because I don't think like the resistance of the water is going to change very much. I wonder if
Well,
I
sorry,
can't
what I
remember.
should say is, are they moving their, because I imagine they're moving their hand at all. So the resistance they're moving through probably becomes greater as the limb speed is faster, and then their hand position or something like that changes.
Yeah, I mean that's probably like I don't think their hand position changes because I think they want as much surface area against the water like as they're pushing through as possible. So like as you're cutting through the air, I think the hand position is going to be very like vertical or linear so that you don't have a lot of air resistance. And
And
then
that's
once you're
and then
in
you
the
can
water,
cut into the water.
yeah, you're not going to slap the water. That's right. You're gonna, yeah, I guess cut into it and then turn.
So that's why I wasn't sure where. I get what you're saying. The water resistance isn't going to change, but the resistance the person has to work against will change as you change the
Hmm.
speed and the position of the hand. So the bands, just like as you change the speed and the position, it changes the resistance. That's where my thought process was
Yeah,
going with that.
which I think is a good thought. I think the bands, at the very least, for like your power speed work, would make more sense than just dumbbells or kettlebells or whatever you're using otherwise. But where my head went was I can't remember what the machines. It's like a cable machine, but you can set the speed or set the tension on it or
Oh,
whatever.
like the Kaisers,
The Kaiser, yeah, yeah,
where you
yeah.
can like pull on them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but where it doesn't matter how much force you're putting into it, it's going to move at the same speed. I think is that how it works. Something I can't remember how it works exactly, but where the resistance is more consistent than with a band or with the free weight. Honestly,
Yeah. If you've ever used, the Kaiser's way smoother than like a regular cable machine.
yeah. So something like that is where my head went if we're extrapolating.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as far as weightlifting goes, I think the loaded jumps make more sense. Um, you might have to be careful with the like the landing forces, the impact, because if they're a swimmer, they're not used to it, but they're also then not subjected to it all the time, like a volleyball player would be,
Yeah.
or
It's,
or something. So like it might be really dangerous for them, but it might also be really fine because they never have that sort of thing happen to them. And one of the big things that I like about weightlifting is the ability to receive force from an external load, which you never do in swimming. So
exactly.
that's, yeah. So I think we're on the same page there
Yeah.
for the
So, like I
most part.
said, final verdict, I would say no,
Yeah.
but I've never thought about weightlifting with a swimmer. So this has been an interesting, the caveat part of it has been interesting to
Yeah. Well, and
explore.
I don't know, like this garage strength guy says that he does weightlift with swimmers.
Yep.
So, I mean, it obviously it has some impact. And like I said, I think I see some transfer, but I think your time is probably better spent elsewhere. But I wanted to give this person some solid experience so that
It,
maybe there's a little bit more incentive to do
yeah, you're
it.
dangling it out there. You're like, but
Yeah.
they can do this stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of spending time, is there any, this is the third part of a weightlifting episode. Any like resources if people want to go out and learn more about weightlifting, anywhere you think you'd want to direct any of the listeners if you want to explore more about weightlifting the sport and whether it's useful to use or not?
Yeah, I would suggest Cal Strength on YouTube. They've got a 3-part tutorial for the clean and the snatch and the jerk, all of those, so 9 videos total.
That's good content.
In my opinion, yeah, definitely the easiest way to learn and to teach weightlifting. Yeah, I've had success teaching myself and then teaching other people with that method. So they don't, those videos anyway, I'm not sure what other content they have. Those videos don't talk too much about the variations, just about the teaching process. I really enjoyed the garage strength videos in a way to apply these things to athletics. It's something to think about anyway. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says. Obviously, he wants to use weightlifting for swimmers, and I just said I don't want to do that. So I don't agree with everything, but but it's an interesting thought anyway. So those are some things that I would say people can check out. How about you?
So there's a book called Weightlifting by Danny Camargo. Danny Camargo is a coach down in the States who works with weightlifting, and man, that's a really great book. So 100%, if you want to learn more about weightlifting, how to teach it, how to coach it, that book by Danny Camargo is fantastic. I've read it. It's good stuff. Another really interesting read is The Essentials of Weightlifting by Mohammed El-Huey. And he's an Egyptian guy. And weightlifting's huge in Egypt. I didn't know this till reading the book, but really interesting, again, a different perspective on weightlifting from a different part of the world where there's the tradition of the sport and things like that. So that was it's a much bigger book. And there's components of strength training in it as well. I only read the weightlifting chapters, but yeah, it was an interesting read and certainly gave a new perspective on weightlifting in some cases for me. So, and then of course it's a closed sport. If you go into Google Scholar and punch in weightlifting kinematics, a lot of world championships, a lot of very high level lifters have been examined. So if you're more of a science nerd and you want to look at numbers and graphs and charts, then see what's available there, because there's a lot of work that's been done on it. So yeah, some good stuff out there for people.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I had no idea that weightlifting was big in Egypt.
I didn't know either. It was an interesting book though. I really enjoyed reading it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good stuff. I'm interested to listen to your music selections for this week. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's shorter than usual between recordings.
That's true. The order is going to be different, but we've like
what we've talked about
hears
versus what the audience hears. Yeah.
Yes. So that's true.
Do you have something different than what you said last time, which will end up being the next episode that's out after this one?
I do. I've spent a little more time the last couple of days playing my guitar than usual. And so I was trying to learn some new songs, and Motorhead, baby. So throwing it a little old school. It might have been influenced a little bit by Zach because he talked about the old school stuff. So I was like, Motorhead, 70s band.
Yeah.
But Motorhead's sick, man. They're not rock, they're not metal, they're not punk, but they have elements of all that in between. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who loves rock and roll or punk or metal who then says, nah, I don't like Motorhead, they're no good. Like Motorhead is, it's tough to not like them if you're into that type of stuff.
That's interesting. So, yeah, that sounds, I do like fusion between genres like that.
You've probably heard some of their songs before.
I have no idea.
Have you heard the song Ace of Spades?
Oh yeah.
The Ace of Spades. The Ace of Spades.
Yeah,
that's
Octane.
Motorhead.
On Octane.
Yeah, that's Motorhead.
Yeah, right on. Okay.
So that's probably their best known song.
Yeah, I might have to check out a few others then, because that sounds pretty solid.
Yeah, Motorhead's sick. So I've been jamming out to them the last few days. So
nice. Have you been playing their songs?
A bit of both.
Yeah,
I've been trying to learn some of their stuff, and then also just listening to it as I do whatever.
Nice. So yeah. Very solid.
What about you? You said you have a surprise.
I have a surprise
in the music section today, so I'm stoked. Can't wait to hear this.
Something different, finally. Uh, sea shanties.
Oh, let's go.
I don't have a group. I don't have, well, I guess I have one group kind of. Big fan of like folk music in general, older folk music, more like upbeat kind of, like if this song sounds like it was written 300 years ago, that is primo.
Yeah.
Um, and recently, I don't know why, like I guess within the last few months, maybe on TikTok, sea shanties have become like a thing. Like there's sea shanty TikTok that people just search, and it's just a bunch of sea shanties.
That's wild.
I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know, but my brother sent me a video on Instagram the other day, which reminded me, oh yeah, I love sea shanties. So
Yes.
as I was doing some work yesterday, I just found a playlist and was jamming out to some sea shanties, some pirate songs, some old folk music.
That's awesome, dude.
It's great. Um, yeah, the I'll next time we record, I'll figure out. I'll try to remember what the other group is. The one on the top of my head right now is Irish Rovers.
Okay.
They have one song that I do really like, "Drunken Sailor." That's a good one. And I think they have some other like Irish folk music as well. But I it might be a different group that I'm thinking of that I really like. So stay tuned, and I'll figure out what that one is.
Yo, I'm stoked. That was a huge surprise. That was awesome.
I'm glad. Glad I
You did
didn't
not
disappoint.
disappoint.
Yeah, good stuff. So yeah. Anyway, that was I guess at least for now a close to the weightlifting series. We'll talk about weightlifting in the future. Maybe we'll do another one like this with cases.
Yeah,
That was
this
a
was
lot of
fun.
fun.
It was
Yeah,
different. I enjoyed
yeah.
it.
So yeah, if people liked this different form of the podcast, then let us know on Instagram. Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, Braden Southern, or anything else. Just hit us up,
For
and
sure.
we'll get back to you soonish. Yeah, thanks for coming along, world.
We will see you next week.
Peace.